Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all so much for listening in today. My name is Joe, and I'm very, very glad to have you here today. This is the last time that I will ever be presenting from my home in Little Downham. My wife and I and our daughter and our dog will be moving very, very soon. If you don't mind, then this is it. You got filler in the wall, you've got the sign down. It's a little bit of a different feeling from normal. So for the last time ever, this is Joe from Little Downham. Do pop in the chat feature where you're watching from, and don't forget to switch your messages to everyone. So you go into your chat feature and you can see a little toggle that exists, and it sort of says to, and then it either says hosts and panelists, or it might say everyone. If it presently says hosts and panelists, don't forget to switch it to everyone so everyone can see your messages, because I can see a bunch of them coming in with people from Cambridgeshire, Huddersfield, Cornwall, Copenhagen, Canterbury, Manchester, Surrey, Lagos. Wow, that's awesome. Australia, Berkshire, Gloucestershire, Suffolk. Wow, it keeps on going. Thank you all so much for being here. You're more appreciated than you know, and let's make today's session just blooming wicked. If that sounds good, there's two challenges as ever. The first challenge is that chat feature. Do keep it going for the duration of today's session. This is such a wonderful experience of education, but we find connection through that chat feature. And as much as Fergus and I will today be doing our best to expand your brain and bring new thoughts to your head, then actually it's a co-created experience where we come together. And there's nothing better when we have these webinars to be able to take a comment from the chat feature and sort of say, you know what, you really added to the conversation. So we have that opportunity today. So please do take it using that chat feature throughout the duration. The second challenge is that if you see a comment that you like, or you hear something from anyone, please do drop it on social media to let people know about what you learned today. Again, this being a co-created experience, but also social media having a very, very similar vibe. I think it's really lovely if we can continue that conversation after today's session and take it to social. So do share your biggest takeaway from today's session on social as well. With those two challenges in mind, let's get introducing Fergus. So today our guest is Fergus O'Carroll, who is the host of the brilliant On Strategy Showcase, one of the only marketing podcasts that I find myself listening back to time and time again. But rather than, when people sort of like give you recommendations for podcasts and they sort of say, listen to this podcast, and you're like, great, that's so non-specific. Let me get specific on why I enjoy On Strategy Showcase and why I think it would be useful for today's session. So the first thing is that Fergus's questions are astoundingly good when it comes to building strategy. That means he's digested, he's understood and internalized what it means to be building great marketing strategies. Today, we're going to be learning about strategies together, and it's not necessarily like a how-to guide on like, here's the step-by-step, but the thoughts, the processes, the feelings that go into building a strategy that really, really stands out. That's what today is really about. The second reason why I really love what Fergus does is that his guests are first-rate practicing marketers. And that second bit is really, really important. They're people who have done industry and leading work. And he's got the benefit of stealing from it, really. And what do they say? Artists steal. And I think that's the way to think about it, that today we have the benefit who sits at the middle of some very, very interesting conversations and is able to internalize it for themselves and then share it with the rest of us. Thank you to Nicole for Joe's cap collection comment. Right now, I think this is the only one I'm wearing. It's actually the only one I'm packing as well. We're going into storage for 3 months, so you'll see a lot more of this cap as well. Today's topic is interesting because we are heading into 2023 sort of planning right now, and I think that's therefore very relevant. I've already seen at least one comment. There we go, from Amy, saying, writing our marketing plan at the moment, so this is going to be a godsend. I love that. Hopefully it's really, really useful, and everyone walks away with one or two little moments of inspiration, little knowledge nuggets, whatever it may be, to really elevate your marketing strategy going forward. Before we get going, there's a couple more bits of housekeeping. So the first is to not forget to use the Q&A. So if you have questions that come up throughout the duration of today's session, then do use the Q&A feature. That's found by wiggling your mouse or tapping on your screen if you're on mobile and finding the Q&A feature. If you get some questions into there, then we'll use those at the end for the Q&A after the presentation. Or if you see some questions that you like in the Q&A, give them a thumbs up, because that will mean that I prioritize them when we come to actually asking the questions. Last thing to do is also to say a big thank you to our sponsors. And this week's featured sponsor is Hrefs. Now, a lot of you will know Hrefs as an SEO tool. They're pretty much one of the two big players for SEO tools out there. I've been a customer for years, so I was really, really happy when they said that they wanted to sponsor. But more than just an SEO tool, which is absolutely first class, the other things that they have going on, you can get their webmaster tools for free right now. And they've also got a bevy of courses, both online on their website, but also on their YouTube channel, that are well worth digesting. I absolutely adore the way that we've had this sort of business interaction with Hrefs. They just believe in our community and they say, here's more content to help you. I think that's really, really useful. So I'm very much appreciative of Hrefs for that. I also want to say a big thank you to Impression, Test, Redgate, Cambridge Marketing College, Brand Recruitment, and of course Hrefs have already been mentioned, and Content Square as well, for supporting us. We'll speak about each one of those in future episodes as we go through the season. All that said, that's my introduction done. So Fergus, it's over to you, my friend. Thank you for taking the time. Let's see if we have you. Do we?
All right, let's see if we got this. You got me?
Got you back.
Can you see me on, am I up on screen?
Your face is up on screen. We don't have your slides just yet. So.
Oh, you don't? Okay, let's try that again then. 1 second, everybody.
I've got a lovely comment here from Andrea, who says, that voice. And Fergus, you do have a beautiful voice, my friend.
Beautiful. Oh man, that's nice. Is the slides up now?
Yes, we've got your slides.
Okay, so I'm everything is good.
All good. We got you.
All right, everybody. Thank you, Joe. It's terrific to be here. I'm kind of nervous to be here too. As I said to Joe earlier, it's different when you're interviewing somebody because you can sort of diffuse the responsibility for performing to somebody else. But when it's just me here by myself, I'm a little nervous. So bear with me. It is greetings from Chicago, which is where the show is based and where I live. For those of you not familiar with On Strategy Showcase, it's really where marketers tell the stories behind the strategies that led to amazing work. And it's work from all around the world. And for listeners, they'll be sort of familiar with the format. But in essence, we invite those sort of brands that have done phenomenal work that has either been recognized through awards or work that I've grown to enjoy, regardless of whether or not they actually won awards, because great work isn't just classified that because it wins an award. But it's brands that are doing really interesting things that I find I think others might find also interesting. And we burrow deep down by sort of interrogating the client and the strategist on the business and sort of trying to unearth the story behind the strategy. And this show is really about strategy, about sort of the strategy and not about the strategist. I never ask people for their resume. It's not of interest to me. We talk simply about the work that comes out of it all, because I've always firmly believed that you can be massively articulate and you can be wonderfully well versed in all things strategy, but if the work that you're generating isn't good, then it's worthless. So we love to focus on the show on the outcomes that come out of this. It's not a show about effectiveness, by the way. It's really just about interesting stories. And I think hopefully they become stories that inspire people and create a sense of excitement and ambition around the industry. We talk about it as being for those who love to continuously learn and those generous enough to share. So as Joe mentioned in the outset, we talked about the title of this, that maybe this is going to seem like you're going to come to an academic sort of presentation about the structure of developing a great marketing strategy. It's really not that. I think what I want this to be is really sort of a conversation and about what great strategists and clients do, how they behave, what they believe, and what their sort of common threads are. I've done this in different formats for strategists about, the sort of the best attitudes of strategists. I'm trying to turn it here more towards marketers, because I know that you guys are primarily a marketing group, and you're probably with smaller companies maybe that are struggling with budgets and struggling with challenges and struggling with being taken seriously many times by your senior C-suite people. And that's a common thread across all marketers, but it might be particularly acute when you're looking at small to mid-sized organizations. So let's talk about a few things that I've learned along the way. And these are some of the things that I think are sort of most important. And this is, of course, is my opinion of this, so forgive me. So I think the first one is be ambitious. And what do I mean by that? I think be ambitious for your brand and for yourself. I think that there's not enough people who realize that great work isn't just for others. And you need to believe that. I think you actually have to expect it from your agency partners and from yourself and from your brand. And this is no matter the size of your organization. You have to insist upon great work, and never forget that big ideas will always beat big budgets. And I think we see that time and time again, where it's really about the thinking, connecting with the right people, connecting with the right agency partners and creative talent. And that doesn't have to necessarily come in the form of an organized agency or an organized service provider. There is tons of wonderful independent freelance talent out there. And there's no reason why you can't cobble together a great team of very smart people to work on your brand. But again, being ambitious means being excited. It's about setting expectations so that the entire team knows that you are actually setting the bar of where things are, not waiting for them to do it. And it works magically for most organizations. Another one is that don't make your beliefs your identity. This is important for strong-willed clients, and it's a danger for both strategists and for clients, but don't assume you know the answers. And a lot of people do. And the unfortunate thing is if you get stuck defending your beliefs, you can very quickly lose credibility. And you can very sort of quickly feel that you get stuck in time. So, don't make your beliefs your entire identity. Good marketers and good strategists are open to disproving their own beliefs. They know that what we know tomorrow will most likely be more accurate than what we know today. And they're willing to go along on that journey. It's really critical that we don't stand for the same things and sort of be inflexible in what we do. Another one is, one of my favorites here, by the way, is don't get distracted by the latest shiny object. We're notorious in this industry for creating new practice areas. It feels like it happens every month. And semiotics is my latest favorite, because we tend to sort of take and repackage old things in new ways. And we have to be careful in doing that, because although there's always sort of useful aspects to all of these, we don't want to sort of, we don't want to let new make us feel obsolete or make us feel sort of insecure about what we're doing. It's so much the fact that, and it's a saying that I can't remember who said this, but I love it. It was that your job isn't to be on top of everything. It's to get to the bottom of it. And to be that, you need to be more generalist oriented than specialist oriented. So don't let yourself get distracted when somebody comes in and talking about things in new and unique ways that you feel, oh my God, I'm now threatened. No, stick to your first principles. They generally work 99% of the time. Another one which I love is cultivate your taste. Great clients on the show have this in common. They sort of know what's going on. They know what exists out there. So I really think it's one of these things where if you want to get excited by this category and by marketing, immerse yourself in what exists out there, particularly outside your category. It's very unfortunate if we get stuck on just trying to compete against our direct competitors. The entire world of marketing can be your inspiration. It can keep you optimistic. It can keep you inspired, and it can make everything you do more successful. Spend time looking at, spend time debating, spend time investigating great work. And that's what our show and very much is about, is providing that opportunity to do that. And then once you're able to get inspired by that, you can sort of immerse your internal cultures in it too. You can workshop it. I know a lot of clients, when they find that they're struggling with selling strong work to their own organizations, they use this tactic of having sort of lunch and learns where they bring in great campaigns, they talk about it, and they find that it then sort of raises the expectations within their own organization, and they begin to expect that kind of work. So cultivate your taste is really a brilliant thing, not only for your current job, but for whatever is next, because Lord knows probably all of us will have at least 10 jobs as we sort of look at our futures. Embrace uncertainty. Success can't be proven in advance. And we all want to minimize risk. We know that our bosses want to minimize risk, but it is arguably the worst thing unless you just want minor incremental growth. The real heroes of marketing are not the sort of the tweakers. It comes from embracing new ideas and embracing uncertainty. And if you can get that as part of cultivating your taste and getting your organization to embrace that and using examples of brands that are doing that, I think it sort of lays the pathway for you to be able to do it yourself. It's important, however, to make sure that you're managing risk, because uncertainty isn't about being irresponsible. It's not about doing dumb things. It's about calculated choice. And so you've got to, you've got to make sure that you're doing the due diligence, that there's rigor involved in what you're doing. But ultimately, you want to feel somewhat uncomfortable and somewhat uncertain about what you're recommending, not because you worry about it being a failure as much as you just know that it's different, and different is good, and it's important. Number 6 is be fair and realistic. You can't beat a dog and expect it to do tricks, right? You've got to treat people well, people that work for you. You've got to treat them with respect, and you've got to make sure that they feel that you're on their side. It's a horrible thing that's happening in our industry right now, is this sort of short-termism that has permeated everything. And I think it's really sort of, in my opinion, it has sort of been destructive in many ways, that we're all running fast and we're all advocating for speed. But the unfortunate thing is great work doesn't happen at speed, or at least there is a very reduced likelihood of it happening at speed. But we have to treat people good. We have to treat people well. And the other side of being fair and realistic is knowing what's realistic from a budget point of view. It's something we all struggle with. And I think that when I look at what I hear from clients, nobody ever gets fully what they want initially. But what they tend to realize is that they can't necessarily achieve the objectives that are set out for them with the budgets that are set out for them. And you can't then go to your agency and say, and Lord knows I've heard this a lot, and probably tons of you have too, and you've probably heard it from your bosses inside brands. Well, we've got to achieve it. And it's like the worst, dumbest thing to ever hear from anybody. You have to be realistic in what can be achieved. And you have to be willing then to step back and say, okay, what can be achieved for what we have? So I think it's as much of, from a marketer's point of view, it's as much about managing up so that you can manage down better. And it's about setting your boss up with expectations and having the confidence to go in. And Lord knows there's a lot of scientific evidence in the world of marketing these days that did not exist 10 years ago. The evidence is out there to help prove your case. It's just that you just have to have the confidence to do it, and the willingness to embrace the uncertainty of that. And the strange thing always is that a lot of clients who are not successful in pushing the stone uphill within one company are enormously successful in the next company they work for, because they have built the reputation in the marketplace for trying to do great things. And people are drawn to that reputation, even though it may not match the work. Build your reputation, and then that will move you along to something that is even more enjoyable and powerful for you. I'd also say that simple works every time. Most of the great campaigns that we have on the show are simple, single-minded ideas or products. They're not simplistic, but they're simple. And strategy, I just worry, becomes too complicated these days. And I think that when we look at some of the great work that's out there, a chicken sandwich changed the fortunes of an entire fast food brand. This is Popeye's chicken. This one sandwich changed the fortune of the entire brand. Simple solutions. Number two, our most recent episode is around Liquid Death. This is a water brand that thinks like a beer. This is a brilliant, very popular episode, but again, a simple idea that is completely counterintuitive, but has built a hugely successful business in the matter of 3 years. I think they on their last round of funding, they're valued at $500 million, selling water in a high, what are these things, in a beer can, in essence. It's just water with a brilliant brand personality and brilliant packaging. Body Form, a fem care brand that speaks honestly. It's simple solutions, honest conversations that are rebuilding brands. Bumble, a dating app designed for women by women, a simple solution, and is building a massively successful business. Persil, a laundry detergent that embraces the counterintuitive idea that dirt is good. Another simple idea. There's this massively complex process that's created for developing strategy, but 9 times out of 10, when we look at the outcome, it's a simple thought, a simple idea. And it begs the question, are we actually creating the confusion ourselves? Are we creating steps that are unnecessary? Or do we have to go through all of that in order to get to simplicity? It's a worthwhile conversation. Last one is Bailey's, which was on the show also, the creamy liqueur that expanded beyond cocktails into the high growth world of adult treats. Simple idea. And again, executed well, built the business by 33+%, I believe, year over year last year or the year before that. I'm not sure which year it was. A few thoughts on strategy, because it's on strategy, we would have to do this, of course. But let me share a few thoughts. Some of these are obvious. Some of these are sort of counterintuitive, but and some might be a little shocking, hopefully. Strategy is informed opinion. That's all it is. We like to think it's about certainty, but it's really just opinion. Now, I'm not saying that rigor isn't important and analysis isn't important. It is, but it's just that just sort of improves your odds of being successful. So if you actually deploy a strategy, recognize that it is an attempt at doing what you feel might be the best way to go at it. It is that opinion, and you deploy it to understand the degree to which it's successful. So if it's not successful, don't fire your agency. Don't fire your team. It's really about learning and then adjusting and moving ahead. Create a great team, but don't expect them to solve every one of your problems right away. It is an iterative process, and it can take many attempts to get it right. The flip side of that is don't defend your strategy internally to your organization. Don't fall on your sword for it, because it is your best guess, but it is just sort of that. So if you cultivate internally a culture of experimentation and a willingness to do that, I think that it will set you up for less of a fall if you don't deliver against your goals. And I think that's an important thing to do. Fundamentally, strategy comes from connecting with people and not necessarily from connecting disciplines. And what I mean by that is, I think there's a lot of times I see documents or so-called plans, and they're really just a bunch of tactics that are the result of connecting with different disciplines. Just because I connected with my social team and they know about this year's plan, and we've got the input of PR and we've got the input of media, that is not necessarily going to make for a great approach. You have got to get connected with real people in the real world. You've got to get out there. And I've got to tell you, every time I hear about people who have done that in genuine ways and not just sat in the office and read reports, read research summaries, but literally gotten out into the real world. It's that objective perspective that adds the most value. It's the ability to be able to say in a meeting, we were talking to X, Y, and Z, and we brought that perspective in. Realize that everybody else has the trend reports. Everybody else most likely has the research reports. It's bringing in that extra layer of objectivity that I think is most critical. And it doesn't have to be highly quantifiable data. We've done episodes with McDonald's and other brands. You would think that they're all about rigid academic approaches to research. They now have a completely different perspective that values the qualitative, anecdotal comment. They recognize that great unlocks in strategy come from conversations with real people in the real world. There are so many examples of that in this show where people say, I was having this conversation, I asked this question, and can you believe this answer? And how that answer then unlocked it for everybody in the room. I'm always a firm believer that we actually have the answers in our head already, but we need a moment that connects all of the dots. Sometimes that happens in the shower. Sometimes that happens in a focus group. Sometimes it happens in a conversation with somebody in line at Starbucks. It's a moment that makes everything come together and makes everything clear. And most of the time that comes from being outside of your own head, getting outside of the office. So I beat that drum every time I can get it because it pays dividends at every turn. That said, there is no one way to develop strategy. And this is where the idea of sort of telling people what they should do. There is no one way to do it. I think that when you're starting out as a client or you're starting out as a strategist, formulas are useful when you're starting out. But the reality is that good strategy isn't formulaic. In many ways, I worry that formulas are what get us in trouble. They actually create a smokescreen that makes us feel like we're doing the good work. But in reality, it can become something that blocks us from doing that exact thing. So I always say that you've really got to be careful that you don't let the how you do it become more important than the what you'll do. And as I say, it's okay to do that starting out because you need some sort of a structure to begin with to start sort of understanding the fundamentals. But you will find your own voice over time. And it's something that it begins to happen. And your own voice means your own approach. And you'll understand that there are on certain assignments, you can skip doing certain things. On certain projects, you'll need to do things completely different. And you just need to understand those fundamentals and then sort of run away from them and let things happen more organically for you. I mean, I think the bottom line is, and this is sort of an interesting quote that I've heard many times. I think it's sort of a Martin Weigel thing at Wyden. He says it's better to be interesting than right and boring. So it's better to be interesting than right and boring. And it's the idea that you can say and feel that your strategy is right, but if it results in boring work, then it doesn't matter if it's right because it's not going to work, just, for so many reasons. Another thing is there is no one truth. And a lot of us as planners love to sort of sit around and wax poetically about the truth. And depending on how poetic you are in your waxing, many people start to believe you. And the unfortunate thing is there is no one truth. There is no one answer. There are many truths in any situation. You can approach it from many different ways. And it goes back to the point of not sort of laying on your sword for your belief. Don't stress about perfection. Don't think that you have to have the absolute solid answer. It's really about, again, acting and learning and adjusting. Rigor, yes, absolutely. Rigor is critical. You got to do your homework. Belief and confidence in your direction, yes, you have to have belief and confidence in your direction. But dogged conviction, no. Be humble about what you know. Talk about it in terms of it being a work in progress. Get together with people early and often to socialize your thinking and get sort of buy-in and get suggestions from other people. That's the best way to develop strategy. As a client or as a strategist, the worst thing to do, because so many of us are sort of insecure people in our world of strategy, the worst thing to do is to sit in a room by yourself and then emerge with glorified cymbals and trumpets saying, here it is, I've got it, here's the document, let's roll. It never works. It's just not the right way to do. It's collaboration all the way from the earliest points right through the end, because your one truth, you might find out pretty quickly when you socialize it with somebody, is that it's either been done before or it's a leaky bucket. But what you'll learn from socializing with other people, as smart people, is that you can make it even better and take more joy out of seeing it created. I mentioned this before. We've made strategy more risky and more complicated than it really needs to be. And I think at the foundation of that is that process risks strategy losing its imagination. I am, for those listeners, regular listeners to the show, you'll know that I'm a fan of the get to buy creative brief format from BBDO. It's one of the simplest formats for writing a creative brief. It's wonderful. And I've come to that conclusion after having to endure terrible creative briefs over the years. And I think that sort of idea of templated thinking is really designed to create conformity of thinking and of ideas. All of these templates of fill in this box, fill this, have you checked this, have you checked that? I'm sorry, that to me creates conformity rather than originality. The get to buy brief allows you to get to the point very quickly, not make it too complicated, and to designate certain things to a conversation with creative people or with your agency or with your client, rather than designating everything to have to be in that document. So keep your imagination strong, keep the purity of your ideas there. Don't let sort of process squeeze that energy out of them. If you skip it, I think you'll enjoy what happens. My last thought is I'm always surprised when I participate in some of the communities for planning that many people who are in the industry ask this question. And the question is, what is a strategy? How do I explain a strategy? And what is it? And a lot of people struggle with this, and it's really, really unfortunate that people are having to struggle with the answer to this. And I think the simplest example that I've ever seen expressed of this was from Theodore Levitt's book, The Marketing Imagination, which is a terrific, terrific book. This is the reality of it, in my opinion. Right? I'm sure there's many people out there that will disagree, but strategy is simply how you connect the two dots here. On the bottom left is where you are today, where you are as a business, where you are from a marketing perspective. The other dot is where you want to be. What are your goals? What are your objectives? The strategy is the line that connects the two dots. And that's as simple as it is. Strategy is what connects the two dots. And so what's the difference between strategy and tactics, you may ask? Strategy is the plan, tactics are the steps or the actions you take to implement it. It's that simple in my mind. And I think to the degree that helps people think about it and explain it, I thank Theodore Levitt for his brilliance. It's not really rocket science, although many of us might want it to feel that way. I love this final quote, which is, "The Ark was built by amateurs, the Titanic by professionals." Keep that in mind. Thank you for your time. I hope that there was something useful in this.
Spot on, my friend. Thank you very, very much. That was really, really interesting. There was a number of people quoting you throughout the duration there, sort of picking up on your turns of phrases. And also, I think there was also a sense of just relaxing to a certain extent. I think a lot of us will put pressure on ourselves as marketers to kind of have the answers or sort of turn up with a document. There was a comment early on from Amy who was sort of saying, "I'm doing the document right now," and I've had that experience too as a marketer. Sort of turning up, and sort of as if sort of coming down with the tablets from the mountain, so to speak, and sort of saying, "Here you go. This is our strategy." Only for it to be swiftly forgotten by the whole leadership team because I hadn't involved them into that process. So I think my shoulders relaxed listening to you about intuition, about sort of not having to be right, about releasing it. But then also, just this general idea of bringing other people into the fold there. So thank you very much. If you want to stop sharing your screen right now, Fergus, you'll be able to see the chat feature blowing up as well with folks just sending their appreciation for you right now, and saying thank you for a really, really lovely talk. Would it be possible to see your face as well, Fergus? Not a problem if not. But
let's see if I can figure out how to.
We'll put your video
screen back here. Okay.
In the meantime, I'll read out some.
Really want to see this face instead. I've got this big microphone in front of it.
There we go. The man, the myth, the legend himself. So thank you. Let's get into some Q&A because we've got 20 minutes or so, and there's some brilliant questions in the Q&A already. So let's go for that. So actually the first question, and I should actually pre-see this as well, because something that you do so wonderfully in your podcast is there is a nice logical flow in terms of going from one question to another. This will not be like that. We will ping pong all over the place. There will be so I hope you don't mind, but there's some brilliant questions from the community, so we want to make sure we're answering them.
I hope I can actually answer them, so forgive me if I can't. If I can't, I will look into them and post them later.
That's answers. Right. Thank you, my friend. So the first one comes from Michael, who says, in your experience, do you think enough marketers understand the difference between strategy and planning? And what are the risks of falling into planning before determining the strategy? And I love this question because I hadn't really ever thought about it in this way. I hadn't really ever thought that there was a difference between planning and strategy. And so, this was a challenge for me, actually, as I was reading that question to understand it. So I'll throw it over to you.
I think if I'm understanding the question right, forgive me if I'm misinterpreting it, but planning, the result of planning is strategy. Unless you are maybe in the world of media, but in the sort of at the beginning of the process, you're conducting planning in order to deliver a strategy. And then sometimes if you're in media, you're being handed a strategy that you then have to plan out. So do I think there's a lack of clarity around those two terms? I don't think so. I think they're pretty clear with the people that I'm exposed to.
Mm-hmm. You are exposed to very good people as well, so that's really, really encouraging. Let's take.
I think there. I will. Sorry, Joe, but I will say this: there is a lot of confusion between strategy and tactics. That's where there's a ton of confusion. It's like there has to be some lines drawn pretty clearly, because the instinct and the easier thing to do and the intuitive thing to do when you're planning is to throw a bunch of tactics in and to suggest that that's a strategy. And that's not true. There has to be a North Star that exists that I would define as the strategy.
100%. And you know what? It's worth making that differentiation point here, because you and I have spent enough time in the industry to probably have taken that bit of knowledge for granted. You know, that there is a difference between strategy and tactics, or even to be using those words and sort of using them quite intuitively. But there will be folks in the chat today who haven't necessarily digested that or been exposed to that. So I just want to emphasize that point, because I remember as a young marketing manager, so it seems like a long time ago, sort of confusing the two, you know, and then sort of saying we're going to do PPC, and then sort of saying that's our strategy, you know, and that's it's not always the same thing. So I think it's very important to get the point. Let's go to the next question from Paul, which is a little bit easier. And Paul asks, what's your favorite strategy book? So, and I can broaden that out as well to resources as well. So, you know, books, resources, where do you go to digest and understand strategy?
Oh man, I literally have hundreds of them on my bookshelves. I'm not kidding. But the ones that struck me the most, a recent one is Douglas Holt, Cultural Strategy. I think that's a wonderful book. Okay. And he talks about brands as being the result of cultural movements. And he does a wonderful job of looking at various brands. Another one from a planner's perspective, let's give you an example of an old one, is Truth, Lies, and Advertising by John Steele. That was probably one of the early books that I read that just energized me as a young strategist. That just got me so excited about the possibilities. But it also taught me a very valuable lesson about the ideal versus the reality. John Steele does a brilliant job in that book of articulating great campaigns. And I'd like to think in many ways that's kind of what we ended up doing on the show, come to think of it. But then you take his work into other agencies and you begin to find out that that's not the way your creatives work. That's not the way your clients think. That's not the way your account directors want to do things with you. So many times the ideal can derail you. And that's why you really need to find and be diplomatic in how you bring these sorts of theories into your own culture, because you can't force it on any culture. You have to sort of spoon feed it. So to some of the points we talked about in the deck, in the presentation, you've got to find your way. But you certainly need to be inspired by many people, many others out there. But I know there's many books that, here's one last one I would say is the recent book by John Herman, Hurman. He has written a book called Future Demand, and he also wrote a book called The Case for Creativity. Two wonderful books, good reads, simple language, and useful.
Amazing. Thank you very much. I love that second point you made. Thank you for making that as well, because I can say this from personal experience, and that's all I can speak from, you know, that the ideal is always the thing we strive for, right? But actually, I think you're making a far more realistic point there, which is that we can, you know, if we can actually sort of have that realistic sense about like interacting with people and their understanding on marketing and what they want and what the business needs, then actually the most quote unquote perfect, you could get a perfect score on creating a marketing strategy test, but it might not be the perfect score for what you actually need in that moment of time. So that collaboration, bringing people in, a perfect marketing strategy doesn't exist, exactly as you said. So thank you very much. I really appreciate that point. I think that would be quite liberating for a lot of folks as well. The next question comes from Dale, and it was a question that sort of struck me as we were going through your points as well, about some of the mindsets. And I wanted to dip into some of your stories, if that's okay, because effectively that's what you do with the podcast as well, is stories. So I'm going to give you a moment to think. So I'm going to start off by reading out the question, which is from Dale. He says, what's your favorite David and Goliath marketing story? As in a small brand using strategy to overcome the odds. Okay,
I love this. Okay, I'll give you two of them. Mm-hmm. One we've had on the show, one we haven't, and I wish we could. And I'm it's actually an older campaign, but It's a Chick-fil-A.
Mhm.
Chick-fil-A in North America is a brilliant David versus Goliath story, and the work was extraordinary. It's basically Eat More Chicken campaign that they did. You can check it out online. I won't waste time explaining it too much here, but it's brilliant, simple work. It ran for like 20 years. The other one is Oatly, oat milk here in the US. And Oatly for me is that sort of poking the establishment type brand. It is sort of irreverent and subversive. The work is really non-marketing oriented and terrific. And we did an episode on that. And we recently did this Liquid Death. Liquid Death is this drinking water brand that used unique packaging and represented itself as kind of being a water brand that thinks like a beer brand. And it is absolutely subversive in that space, and another great example of it. Those are two that come to mind. Dave, let me see if I can give you one more. Geez, if as we're going through this, I'll think of more.
I love that.
Anyway.
I think there's something really curious about this as well, because that subversiveness that you're speaking about at the moment is an interesting trend you see on social media. And I've seen a few people verbalize this on LinkedIn quite recently as well. So it's definitely not my thought. But you see a lot of brands starting to look and feel the same on social media in particular. So there was a lot of conversation, for example, around Ryanair this past week, and them being actually quite rude to their customers. But they're an extreme example of brands who sort of exemplify this sort of really chatty style that exists on social media in particular. And the point that I've seen some people making is that this chattiness, this sort of specific style, it means that a lot of brands are just starting to look and feel the same. And actually, the examples that you've just given, it feels like these are examples of companies who are not looking to sort of keep up with a trend, but just actually be themselves. Do you find that is like a really important, I mean, that has to be the most important thing, right? In part of the strategy?
Well, I think more and more we have the evidence to demonstrate that in fact people don't pay attention to advertising. Mm-hmm. More and more, it's obvious, right? But you also have to realize that you still have to be interesting. You still have to be memorable. You still have to be recognizable in your work. So you've got to. The instinct for too many marketers is to do a version of what other people in their category are doing, mm-hmm. because that's sort of safe, right? But you've got to throw that away, to the point we made in the presentation. You've really got to be bold, and you've got to be sort of embrace risk. Because that's where most of the growth is coming from. You can accept just incremental gain, or you can make leaps. And the way to make leaps, if you don't have massive budgets, is to do bold, calculated things. Mm-hmm. The Liquid Death, for example, in our episode, they said that one of their key metrics in terms of sentiment metrics and social is 50% hate it. That's their metric. They want 50% of people to hate it. Mm-hmm. Because that's fuel. That's almost like paid media, right? Mm-hmm. When that circulates. So that's the sort of counterintuitive approach that I think people are realizing, that in an environment where it's increasingly difficult to get attention, even with good work, mm-hmm. that you have to be bolder than ever, yet being smart with an underlying strategy. Don't just do wild shit for the sake of wild shit. Do smart shit, but do it in an interesting way. For example, my last point would be the best way to think about it, I feel, is to think about it as being strategically consistent but creatively unpredictable.
Nice. Yeah, I love that. I love that. You got these little moments of gold that sort of come out and I just want to capture. So, thank you. I appreciate it. Bethan says a great way of thinking here. So that's appreciated by folks watching in as well. We do have a question here from Amy, which I think is a good one, and I lean on your experience here more than anything, because I think you've probably done this on a day-to-day level before, which is Amy's question comes in and says, how do you actually plan out the day-to-day of implementing the strategy? For me, it's one thing to make a plan, but actually wake up and saying, okay, this is what I'm going to go and do today is quite a different thing, and something that Amy struggles with. So, it's that sort of that translation of what you get in this document to what exists on the day-to-day level. What's your experience with that?
Well, I think you've at the earliest stages, you've got to convert your strategy into tactics. Mm-hmm. So while you have a defined strategy that you feel comfortable with, you then have to convert it into tactics, which is, how am I going to implement this? So it's got to be, here's what we're going to do in media, here's what we're going to do in social, here's what we're going to do in packaging, here's what we're going to do, et cetera, promotions, et cetera. So you've got to map them out. And I think you have to work with a broader team on that if you have that broader team. But the answer to the question is you got to convert them into tactics. Mm-hmm. And I think you have to understand sort of that there's maybe about how you sort of map out a hierarchy, which things need to happen first in order to create the opportunity for what happens next to happen. So there has to be some sort of a hierarchy in that. I would suggest that was that Amy was the question? Yeah. Amy. I would suggest, Amy, you give a listen to the new series that we're going to be launching in the next couple of weeks. It's going to be all about creating effective outcomes at every stage in the planning and creative development process. There's going to be 6 episodes. Each of them will be taken by a sort of a thought leader in that particular area, be it setting budgets and planning and setting objectives, data analytics and the hierarchy of metrics will be another one, writing a creative brief will be another one, et cetera, et cetera. Comms planning will be another one. And so these episodes should help you. They better help with, those sorts of things. We're going to dig into creating the best outcomes, most effective outcomes in each of those buckets. And there'll be 6 of them. Lovely. I think it starts in about 2 weeks.
Amazing. I love it. And you say, I think it starts in 2 weeks. You definitely, you strike me as someone who will know.
We've actually recorded the first 3 episodes, so we're just going to launch it and get it out here.
That's amazing. Amy says, I definitely will. Thank you. That sounds so helpful. So there we go. I want to start picking some questions which I don't think we've heard before, and I'm going to do the slightly dangerous thing of reading the question for the first time as verbalizing it. So, but it looks like an interesting topic, which is a question that comes from Shakila, who asks, with the recession that is coming up, how can we, as marketers, be proactive so the client understands that they shouldn't cut on marketing costs? So how can we build trust in marketing, in effect? And I think this probably speaks to a lot of your points around sort of bringing people on the journey, presumably.
Yeah, I think you've got to look at syndicated data on this, because there has been some things circulating around sort of making that case, the connection between reducing spend and the impact on sales. And I think Les Bonat and Peter Field have done some work on this. Certainly, I would expect that Byron Sharp at Ehrenberg Bass would have done some work on this. I know it's out there. I don't know enough about it to really give anything useful to that. I apologize. But I do think there is stuff out there. And I think the best thing to do is to look at places like maybe like Work in London, or Work.com for some content. And Work has got a paywall, unfortunately, but it is out there. And but I don't unfortunately have an answer. My only comment would be, if your organization is truly a marketing organization rather than a sales-driven organization, or if you are taking people along as a journey, as you say, Joe, you will sort of build an understanding of the fact that you have to be spending in order to be remembered. And that even in a recession, that brands that come out of those dips, economic dips, come out stronger at the end of it. There is definitely data out there. I wish I had a better answer that I could point you to a specific place, but I don't off the top of my head.
No, I appreciate that, and I think you pointed to a few resources there where we can sort of head. So I appreciate that. I want to, this is the question that people ask me, and I can never I can never answer, because every webinar feels like one of these little babies of sessions. But I want to sort of ask you, of the top case studies and strategic implementations that you've seen throughout the course of the podcast, for the 2.5 years that you've been creating it, what are the ones that really stick out as these moments of brilliance or excellent execution? Like, this is 3 minutes before the end, just an opportunity to highlight some of your favorite case studies, because that's what the podcast is all about, right?
Right. Okay, so
we should have said this at the beginning, because I'm sure we could have gone for an hour. Right?
Yeah, thanks, man. That's great. I'd say Marmite Gene Project, from Adam and Eve DDB, and anything that they've done on Marmite is just brilliant. Mm-hmm. I think that that whole thing is just so smart. It's so it's so imaginative, and it really connects with sort of the truth of the human experience, and what people do with that product. The other one I like, that you guys will know in your neck of the woods, is Yorkshire Tea, mm-hmm. From Lucky Generals. And I love that. I love that campaign. I love We Do Things Proper. I think that is extraordinary work. I do love what Oatly has done. I think that they've done really strong work, and in a completely counterintuitive way. I've got to think of one more. I've got to get one more to give you here. Let me see if I can pull something up very briefly here.
I like that
you can look at your next question.
No, I like that you go with 4s. It's quite unconventional. Most people go with 3s. So this is...
Oh, really? Then maybe I can just stop, and then that'll be it.
Well, you've said about taking bold risks, I'm afraid. So you've set your precedent well early.
Oh, one other thing I would mention is Volkswagen. We're releasing a classics episode on Volkswagen, the 1960s Volkswagen, mm-hmm. Campaign. But Volkswagen has done a brilliant job of having a simple brand platform at the center of its work for the last 60 years. And I do love that. And it's the idea that Volkswagen drivers are frustrated with the status quo. Mm. And when you look at, and they tightly define that as that they are drivers of change. Volkswagen drivers are drivers of change. And I love that idea. And because you see, when you look back at the work of the last 60 years, right back from when it started in the counterculture movement of the 60s, right up to the 1990s with the Da work here in the US. And again, that's sort of, that was sort of a Gen X thing back then, as like the slacker movement. And so there was times of great social change is when VW was at its most successful. It's able to plug into that really beautifully, because it has at its heart that sort of idea of being, for those who are sort of disenchanted with the status quo. It becomes a symbolic, it's a signal of that for many people. So I do like that, and I wish I'd prepared a little better to give you more. And everybody on the show is brilliant, so excuse me that I can't bring up your campaign.
Not at all. No, there's 4 great episodes there, and I think I've listened to 3 of them and really enjoyed them. The Yorkshire Tea one, unfortunately, what you've also done quite unwittingly is start a debate about the best tea in the chat, I'm afraid, Fergus. So you're in dangerous territory.
You got to be a Yorkshire man or woman to really advocate for it, right?
Well, that was certainly the idea behind the campaign, right? So it was something quite special. And it was really nice, actually, as well, to see it come out on TV, because you see
Guinness Made of More. Guinness Made of More is another brilliant one I encourage everybody to read, for really phenomenal fundamentals about understanding everything about your brand and defining it. It's really wonderful.
That's awesome. Thank you very much, my friend. Right, this is our time. So I'm going to have to call it to a close there. I think there's so much more worthy of investigation on this topic. So undoubtedly we'll revisit it But thank you very, very much. Just to emphasize that in the chat, we've got Nicole, Claire, Amy again, Josh, Jennifer, Lynn, Emily, Zoe, Francesca, Katie, Simon, Carly, Sally, Philippa, Laura, all saying thank you, and they're just keeping on coming. So thank you very much for taking the time, my friend.
Hey, my pleasure. Thank you for having me, Joe. Appreciate it. And you guys are doing great work there. So onward and upward, right?
Absolutely. Well, we only win when we're helping each other out. So I think that's the best way. So I appreciate it, and I
Thank you,
appreciate
everybody.
everyone in the chat too, making this so special. We'll see you next Tuesday, and in the meantime, thank you very much, Fergus. Thank you, everyone. Please do take the time to thank the sponsors, and we'll see you very soon. Bye for now.